everybody, Keith here again. I'm going to do my in bloom in December. There are some plants which are just there. This is what might or might not be Sturbic red, as I always describe it. This will be gone in a couple of days. It's been lovely. It's lasted a long time, probably because it's cooler, but it's been nice. It's growing quite well. Disappointing thing is, if you remember, this had an unusual new growth set up with two growths. One of those two rotted off and died, and I don't know why. The other one, which is next to it, is absolutely fine. So hopefully that one will pull on. The same really goes with my white twinkle. It's lost its scent. The flowers are beginning to fade. The red one went several weeks ago. But it's got some new growth starting to show already. So I think this will be okay. There's some leaves going on some old pseudo-bulbs. Basically, this has been a nice buy. I'm very pleased with that. It's going to want repotting, I think, once this lot's all over, because it's absolutely crammed in that pot. And I'd like to know what's happening down below, because we've got some brown tips suddenly appearing. But other than that, really pleased. One that will be coming into flower fairly soon, the spike. Where are we? Spike is there. This is an Oncidium type. It's Bartley Schwartz Highland. It's a very pretty looking little plant, but the really nice thing is it has a very strong, very powerful scent. It's a very pleasant scent as well. It'll quite happily fill this conservatory when it's out, so that'll be a real treat to see when it finally arrives. Right, now then. Pardon me, I've got a bit of a snuffle. My spring dream is still going very well. This I bought from our local IKEA for about £8, I think it was, last year, probably April or May, something like that. It was one of the, apart from the American hybrid path, which you'll see in a minute, this was really the first of the non-phalaenopsis orchids that I bought. And it's done extremely well. It grew a really big cane, and it's flowered, as you can see, almost all the way up. Now, the interesting thing with this one is it's a spring dream type, but it has purple fringes. The usual one is spring dream Apollon, which has white flowers. There's another one, which I think this probably is, spring dream Kamiko, which has some purple in its makeup. When I bought it, it was pure white, and the last time it flowered, the purple faded. And I don't know if you noticed, the petals were quite ruffled on this one. And then we've got this. This is a keiki off the same plant, and it's pure white. Absolutely no purple. Well, there's a smidge of purple just there on this one, but hardly anything. It's genetically identical. You tell me why that is. Is it age? Is it strength? Is it the amount of daylight it's seen, as somebody suggested? I've absolutely no idea. It's obviously happy. It's put two buds there, there's two buds there, and unless I'm very much mistaken, we're going to get another bud all the way down there. So I can definitely recommend the Spring Dream type as a beginner's orchid, because it's taken, you know, a lot of, I won't say hammer exactly, but it's withstood me learning how to care for it, let's put it that way. Then we come to a couple which I've used before as examples of oddities, and this is one odd for this particular one, which isn't in flower or looking like it's going to flower very soon at all. Noble E type, an old hybrid called Lady Coleman, named after the wife of one of the Coleman's mustard family, that was a big collector and hybridizer. This one didn't flower last year, and it put up a really big cane this year. Nice and sturdy, it's not showing any real signs of nubbins though, which is curious, because again, genetically identical. This is another keiki off the same mother plant, bought at the same time from the same guy, and they were the same size. And you can see on this one, the new growth is nothing like as big. But this one, as I'm sure I've told you before, after it flowered it did nothing. It just sat there and did nothing, whereas the other one put out the new growth. So the other one probably had, oh, I don't know, 3 or 4 months more growing time than this one did. Now, to be fair, this new growth is every bit as big as the previous one. So it's not going downhill, but it's not progressing in the same way. But we've got buds. So this one, say genetically identical to the other, flowered last year and is going to flower again this year. The flowers look very much like the Dendrobium nobile species, but it's a nice plant, very forgiving plant, that one. Now, these next two are nothing to do with me, in the sense that I bought these relatively recently from Burnham's, and it's going to be very curious to see how these develop. This is supposed to be Dendrobium nobile species, variant virginale, which is a pure white one. But I'm sure you can see the buds have purple in them. So whether that will open purple and fade back, but it should be completely white. Now it has, to be fair, it has lost some of the purple that was there. But it's going to be very, very interesting to see just what that does. And whether I can get it to reflower again, because as I say, I bought this and it was just in bud when it got here from Burnham's. I'm looking forward to seeing that. You know, it'll be, as I say, albeit nothing to do with me, my first nobile species to flower. This is the other one. This is albiflorum, which is white, but it has a purple throat, so it's not quite the same. But it's another variant of nobile, again bought in flower or in bud. So nothing to do with me, but it'll be nice to see what it looks like. I do have a species nobile, again bought from Burnham's, but bought as a small plant, a much smaller plant from Burnham's. At the time it had just a couple of new growths and a few roots. It put up this quite nice cane, and I thought, oh, perhaps it'll flower. I can't see any real signs of a nubbin yet, but it's put up a new growth and that's progressing nicely. So I'll keep feeding this one, and if I don't get a flower this year, well, to flower next year probably. It may simply be not big enough. But that one is Cooksonia, which is a very deep purple. It's very much the opposite to anything else. So, right, I'm now going to have to take the camera off the tripod, so I'll pause it a second and we'll start again with this. This is a no ID Cymbidium that I bought about this time last year, probably November I think, last year, and it was from a local garden centre. It still had a few fading flowers on the spike. Hasn't got the most fantastic spike, it's only got 4 buds on it, but it's nice big flowers, and I do love the contrast between the white background and that spotting. I've got another Cymbidium in bud. This one I've no idea what it's going to look like. I bought this from Home Base for just a few pounds when it was out of flower in a hell of a state. What's really grinding my gears, as the Americans would say, is that I tried to tie it to a stake and knocked off the top 7 buds. So instead of having 10 blooms, I've got 3. But at least it hasn't dropped any of those, so I'm going to get something out of it. And then finally, for what's in the conservatory, we just about got these. I'll put my hand behind it to try and get a better colour rendition against the light coming in through this window. This is Peony Barcina. It's one of the autumn flowering hybrids. It's a lovely little thing. Bought it with the one behind it from a fellow member of the East Midlands Orchid Society who used to grow peonies commercially, but now gone back to doing this as a hobby. They were nice big bulbs. They've rooted well, they've done well. Interesting, this one, that flowered straight away. It pushed another one up which looked like it was going to flower. That blood blasted. I mean, you tell me why, because I mean one's behind the other, but nevertheless the leaf is coming, so I'm going to get probably 3 bulbs at a minimum off these, so that'll nicely increase the population. All my other peonies are in the fridge and will stay there for at least another month. Okay, more coffee, to quote dear Roger. The next group Paphiopedilum American Hybrid. It's a great plant for a first path for anybody that wants to try something a bit different, because you can treat this one exactly the same as a Phalaenopsis. It lives on a northwest facing windowsill, gets watered regularly because these don't like to get dry, of course, but just doesn't need a lot of looking after. Grows steadily. It's got 2 growing ends to the rhizome, but of course that means you end up with a dead space in the middle where the old fans have died away, because as most people will know, these things flower once and then that fan dies and then it puts out new growth and the next one goes and so on. And both ends are going to flower this year, which is nice, but they're quite long lasting flowers. They're quite large flowers. I mean, the whole plant is big. That's the big disadvantage of it. You're talking about something that, if it was able to form its leaves properly, you'd be talking about something that would be at least 2 feet 60 centimetres or more across the leaves. This gets a bit constricted by the windowsill, but that's the only downside. It's a big beast, but a pretty one. If you're a bit more strapped for room, you want to try slippers, try a Maudii. Much smaller, but again it's perfectly happy in the same conditions as Baffio Pedalum. If you can keep one of those on a windowsill, this will do perfectly nicely. Doesn't get a lot bigger than this, that's about your lot. Mine nearly always has one bud on a spike, and like the American hybrid, this one's got 2 spikes this time. This one is just beginning to open. I don't know how well you can see that, but it's just beginning to open. It's quite a pretty one. It will look something like that when it's finally out. So that's Baffio Pedalum Maudii. Very commonly available from nurseries, and as I say, a real easy one to grow. I've only got a couple of Zygopetalum types, and this is Zygonosia Rhine Blue Angel, which I got from Burnham's in July because it's got a very unusually coloured flower. Very unusual. The lip sticks more or less straight out. Makes it a bit of a swine to actually photograph. Like all Zygo group, it flowers on extremely immature pseudobulbs. This one hasn't even started swelling really. So we've only got one flower, which is fewer than he had when it was when I bought it, but I'll take that as it settles into my conditions. We've got another new growth here which hasn't flowered yet. There's an older new growth there which is on the plant when I bought it. It hasn't flowered, almost certainly won't now that it's formed its pseudobulb, but it's putting strength in. We've got lots of nice roots in there, and it's doing okay in the normal thing. Again, this one sits on a southeast facing windowsill, and gets watered around about once a week. Phalaenopsis Mini Mark. I do like the small Phalaenopsis. Quite a different shaped flower to the big ones that you see, but very pretty. Grows quite nicely. This has been acted rather unusually this year. It put up a spike early in the year which lasted no time at all. I was quite concerned that the plant was ailing, but then after a little period of rest and putting this leaf up, it put up this spike, and this spike's been progressive. It's extended, it's put flowers on, and then they've folded off and it keeps opening more. It's got to the end of the spike now. We're on its last bud, but as if that wasn't enough, we've got another spike coming up on another part of the plant, so I'm going to have the pleasure of this one for a while. When I repotted it last, it had some very long roots, so I didn't cut them off. I don't like cutting off roots just like that. But it's now put out a lot of roots, and they are going in, but I'm beginning to wonder whether the roots in the bottom have not done well. Perhaps it's not got enough root, it wasn't drying out fast enough, and it may need a look at before too much longer, but I'm not going to disturb it while it's happily flowering. Arguably my favourite orchid, this, just for its colour. This is the Phalaenopsis type Dendrobium, Thailand Black, from the Sarnook stable. Almost impossible to photograph with a good sense of the colour. If you expose for the petals, you can't see the trumpet. If you expose for the trumpet, the petals look a sort of lilac colour, when the whole thing is a very, very dark purple. Grew very well for me this year. It came in a pot with 2 little plants in. This part of it, the bit sturdier part, with a nice healthy new growth which is flowered. The other one's not really flowered, but I'm looking forward to getting some more new growth on this and turning this into a specimen plant, because I think a specimen of this would look really, really nice. This one's another Sarnock baby. This is Polar Fire. Again, it put out a nice new growth, taller than the previous one, but not quite as thick. At least at the moment, it's not quite as thick. It's got a lot of roots in the pot, some of which are looking a bit tired these days. So it's doing okay. The canes are not too desiccated, although the older ones are not looking too wonderful. But again, I'm looking forward to getting this with more new growth on it. I saw one at the East Midlands Orchid Society Christmas meeting a few weeks ago, and that was a much, much bigger plant, and it looked something extremely special. A baby, Dendrobium oligophyllum, a really tiny plant. I bought it in July from Burnham's, and it's flowered amazingly in the last couple of months. It just keeps flowering and flowering and flowering. Very pretty little thing. I'm a little bit concerned. I took it into one of our East Midlands Orchid Society meetings recently, and one of our guys who's a real dendrobium expert said the problem I'm going to have with this is the way it's been reared. The main body of the plant is in a moss plug, and with the fineness of the roots, it's going to be very, very difficult to get that moss off. So it could be an absolute pain to keep this in good condition. Because if I'm not careful, even if I wait until it's got some new growths and some new roots coming, I could end up damaging so many of the old roots it could keel over, which would be a great shame, because this thing has given me a fantastic show. I mean, how much is down to me and how much is down to Burnham's, it's hard to say at this stage, even though I've had it 6 months. So that's Dendrobium oligophyllum. Okay, the last group. Let's carry on with the Phalaenopsis theme. This is, I bought it as Leodoro. It could be, it may not be. I'm sure it was Roger that said there's actually 2 versions of this, depending on which way round it was crossed, which was the pollen parent, which was the seed parent. They look very, very similar. One is scented, one isn't. This one is not. It's quite a slow orchid. It grows quite well. It's got a number of spikes and branches, but they never seem to come out very fast. They seem to do a little bit and stop, and then do a little bit more and stop, and eventually they'll decide to do something or not, and I can't work out what it is, but the flowers are very long lasting. The flowers are much more like Mini-Mart. They don't have the curled back little whiskers that a lot of fowls that you get from supermarkets and what have you do. Like that one, but it looks as if some of the older roots are beginning to go. We've got some nice new ones, so I think before very much longer that's going to have a repot. to stand all the way over here so you can take in just how big this thing is. This is, of course, one you've seen before. This is Phalaenopsis Pink Twilight. The story of getting this, I went to Tatton Park Flower Show in July 2018, watched a talk by Lawrence Hobbs, one of the UK nurserymen, about orchid keeping. He used this plant as a repotting demo. It was out of flower. I asked a few questions. I asked him a few more after the talk was over, and he pushed this at me and said, "Do you want it? Because it's no good to me, I can't sell it like this." So I said, "Thank you very much." And it's done extremely well for me. I mean, it's this big spike, you could argue, is on its way out. It's lost its first flower, but all the others, which were much later coming out anyway, are still looking good. And we've got this branch from the last spike, which has got 4 on, slightly smaller, but still very nice. This one does have the little curly whiskers, which I mentioned just now. Its root system is colossal. Some of them branch excessively. You can see with this one. It looks more like Medusa's hair than a typical Phalaenopsis root. But the pot is being distorted by the roots that are in it, so this is going to have to be repotted. But I am going to have to be extremely careful to keep this thing well fed, because I had another, I still have it, just another orchid which flowered itself almost to death. It flowered and flowered and flowered, and then just keeled over. It had exhausted itself. But that was before I was quite so much into orchid keeping and trying to understand it better. Right, continuing the monopodial theme, Vanda Apricot Brandy. Now, this still is, I suppose, in many ways, an experiment for me. I mean, most people keep their Vandas hung with completely bare rooted, and I simply don't have the space or the conditions to grow it with. And I had a chat with somebody at an East Midlands Orchid Society meeting who said he kept all his Vandas in glass jars, and it had made watering them and keeping them much easier. So I thought, well, I have that, and I got a jar, and Vandas tend to be quite expensive in the UK. So I hung fire. I was really torn as to whether to pop out quite a bit of money on something that I might kill very soon afterwards. And in the end, I saw this one on the Spiceotic website on eBay and just thought, you'll do. And it came, I was very, very pleased with it. I mean, I love the colour of these flowers. It put up some leaves for me. This is the first reblooming, and it's bloomed very nicely. And there is the pot. It's kept in there. I water that probably 3 times a week in summer and once to twice a week in winter, depending on the colour of the roots. And so far, so good. And then we go to the opposite extreme. This is a Rhinanthera. This is Rhinanthera amayani crossed with Monachica. I got this because somebody said Rhinantheras are easier to keep than Vandas because you can keep them in a pot. Again, I got this from Spiceotics the same time as I got the Vanda. Nice plant. Hasn't done a heck of a lot. It just put up a couple of leaves, one of which hasn't finished growing yet. But very much to my surprise, it's put up a spike, and that spike's moving quite fast. So that's nice to know. I think it's going to have to be repotted before long. I'm not completely happy. The 2 roots it did grow haven't gone into the pot, so I think I need to have a look and see what's happening and whether it needs further treatment. But if it flowers, then I'm well pleased. I'm sure you'll all be delighted to know this is the last of my December roundup. One of my two adult Dendrobium baryotes. The other one has completely finished flowering, all its flowers have gone. This one was a little bit behind. One spike's gone, some of the others are not looking very happy, but this spike's still got a couple of buds to come out. So I've got it for a little while yet. It came from one pot with a couple of plants in. I separated them, and I think almost certainly down to my handling of them in the repotting, they struggled. They tried to put some new growths, but in both cases, neither of them had done well until relatively recently, and they are now starting to put up new growths which are going through to do something instead of aborting. So I'm hoping that this means we've finally crossed some kind of a Rubicon. But yeah, that's the last of my December plants in flower. There's a few more in spike, but one falling spike looks a lot like any other falling spike. So all it really remains for me to do is to wish all of you the happiest of New Years. I hope 2020 treats you, your families and your orchids very, very well. I'd really like to thank all my viewers, all my subscribers for letting me share my hobby with you and listening to my ramblings for the last few months since I've started this nonsense. Happy New Year again. I'll see you soon. Bye.